You have been deceived. Everything you know about the 19th century is a carefully staged decoration, concealing a truth that will make your skin crawl. We've been told all our lives about the dirty, stinking cities of the past, where filth flowed down the streets and people drowned in unsanitary conditions. But stop for a second. Open the archives. Look at real photographs from the mid-19th century. What do you see? I'll tell you what you see. You see sterile, eerie, unnatural cleanliness. Where are the mountains of manure? Where are the tons of garbage? Where are the crowds of people? Why do the huge avenues of European and American capitals look like they were just washed with soap and vacuumed with a giant vacuum cleaner? Historians feed us fairy tales that the main mode of transport was the horse. Let's turn on logic and simple math that they diligently hide from us behind dates of wars and revolutions. Imagine a city with a population of 500,000 people. According to official statistics, supporting the logistics of such a city required at least 50,000 horses. One adult horse produces on average 22 to 33 pounds of manure and several gallons of urine per day. Multiply 50,000 horses by 33 pounds. That's 1.65 million pounds of manure daily. 825 tons of biological waste that should fall on the cobblestones every single day. Now imagine a week of such life. That's over 5,800 tons of feces. Mountains as tall as a two-story house that should have blocked all traffic. We're told there were armies of street sweepers. Seriously? Try clearing 825 tons of sticky muck by hand, with shovels and brooms, without hydraulics, without dump trucks, without mechanized brushes. It's physically impossible at the pace demanded by life in a metropolis. But look at photographs of Paris, St. Petersburg, Moscow, or Washington from the 1850s and 1860s. The cobblestones are impeccably clean. Not a single speck. No hint of wheel ruts from carts, no piles of straw, no telltale streaks. The streets look like they were commissioned into service yesterday. Skeptics will immediately shout their rehearsed phrase about camera exposure times. They say the exposure was too long, half an hour or an hour, so moving objects, people and carriages, simply dissolved and didn't register on the image. Fine, let's assume. Let's assume people were ghosts who moved so fast they vanished. But tell me, at what speed did piles of manure move? Do feces know how to run? If there really were thousands of horses on the streets, their waste products would lie motionless. And on photographs with any exposure time, we would see blurred dark spots, piles, dirt along the curbs. But there are none. The road surface is pristinely clean. This leads us to a chilling conclusion that shatters the entire picture of the world. Either there were virtually no horses in cities in the mid-19th century, or those cities were empty. Completely empty. Look more closely at the architecture. Extremely wide avenues designed for massive traffic. Why build a road 165 feet wide for a cart 5 feet wide? It's economically unfeasible for a civilization that, as we're told, lit homes with candles and heated with firewood. Urban planning of that time shows a scale worthy of the modern automotive era, not the age of horse-drawn carriages. Who built these giant cities and, most importantly, for whom? There's one more detail that historians can't explain. It's the absence of infrastructure for housing such a number of animals inside the city. Where are the gigantic stables? To house 50,000 horses, you need acres of covered spaces, haylofts, fodder storage. On old maps, we see dense residential development, tenement houses, palaces, temples. But we don't see industrial zones for servicing horse-drawn transport on the scale required by the math. Where did they hide the horses at night? In apartments? Official history is cracking at the seams as soon as we apply a calculator and engineering analysis to it. We're told the 19th century was the age of steam and coal, the age of dirt and soot. But on panoramic shots of San Francisco or Moscow from that time, there's no smoke from chimneys. Factories stand idle, smokestacks cold. Can't see the sky because of smog? No, the sky is crystal clear. Visibility perfect all the way to the horizon. This sterile cleanliness is not a sign of superior cleaning culture. It's a sign of absent life activity. The cities stand like ready-made sets, waiting for actors. Or they were cleared out, completely. Think about this. If there were no horses, what did people use to get around? And if there were people, where did they disappear to from the photographs? The long exposure theory doesn't explain the absence of construction debris, vendors' stalls, stray dogs, and most importantly, the signs of wear on the road surface. The cobblestones lie perfectly even, not a single stone dislodged. This is possible only in one case: if no one had driven on this road for centuries, or if it was just laid using technologies that surpass our modern stone-laying capabilities. We are approaching the first shocking milestone of our investigation. The cities of the 19th century that they show us on old daguerreotypes are ghost cities. They are fully ready for life, with the most complex architecture, incredibly beautiful buildings. But there is no biological life in them. No chaos characteristic of human settlements. This looks as if the civilization that built these masterpieces disappeared overnight, and the new settlers, our great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers, simply haven't arrived yet. Or they were brought later. Much later. But where did the construction waste go? Have you ever seen a construction site? It's mud, dust, brick fragments, scaffolding. On mid-19th century photographs, all the buildings are already constructed. There isn't a single frame where we see the process of laying the foundation of some capital building in the historic center. They just stand there, ready, clean, without a single crack. Official science tells us they built like that for centuries. But excuse me, any construction is a process. Where are the photos of excavations? Where are the photos of material delivery on those very horses? There are none. Only the result exists. We stand on the threshold of a discovery that turns our perception of time upside down. Perhaps the 19th century as we know it is a fiction, an insertion, an artificial pause between the death of one highly advanced civilization and the beginning of ours, primitive one, which started when we simply excavated these cities and moved into them, inventing a tale about horses to explain the presence of roads. But if there were no horses, then how did these gigapolises actually function? What force moved cargo and people without leaving behind even a gram of pollution? The answer to this question is hidden in technologies that were stolen from us. If the surface of 19th century cities raises questions with its sterility, then what's beneath it blows the mind of any engineer who dares to remove the blinders of academic education. Let's go below the cobblestone level, into the sewers. We're told that in the mid-19th century in London, Paris, and other megapolises, a sanitary revolution occurred. Supposedly, tired of cholera, people picked up shovels and dug thousands of miles of tunnels, lining them with brick. Sounds heroic until you start examining the technical maps and photographs of these sewers. This is not just drainage ditches. These are underground palaces. Perfect brickwork, arched vaults, geometry that modern subway builders would envy. The brick quality is such that it hasn't deteriorated in an aggressive, wet environment for a century and a half. Do you understand what that means? To produce billions of bricks of such quality, you need industrial kilns, maintaining a stable temperature above 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Where are these factories? Where is the fuel for them? In the 19th century, according to the official version, they heated with wood and coal. To fire that amount of ceramics, they would have had to clear all of Europe's forests to the root. But the forests still stand. Now imagine the logistics. Billions of bricks need to be delivered to the city center, lowered underground, and laid. By hand. By torchlight. Without ventilation. Any builder will tell you, in such conditions, without forced oxygen supply, workers would suffocate within an hour. But we're told that these cyclopean systems were built in a couple of decades by men in bast shoes. That's a lie. These tunnels were there long before they let sewage into them. We simply adapted ancient technical communications for our primitive needs. Let's go up a bit, but not all the way. Look at the ground floors of old buildings in your city. Walk through the historic center. What do you see? Windows that go halfway into the ground. Entrances with steps leading down. Official science calls this the cultural layer. Supposedly, over hundreds of years, people dragged so much dirt on their souls that the ground level rose 10 to 13 feet. Do you believe this? Think about the idiocy of this claim. The cultural layer only grows where no one cleans for centuries. But we're talking about living cities. If dirt accumulates in front of your doorstep, you sweep it away. Not wait until it covers the windows, then remodel the door into a window and cut a new entrance on the second floor. Look at the construction of these basements. These are full-fledged floors, with high ceilings, arched windows, grand doors now walled up with soil. No sane architect would design a window that butts against a blank earth wall. It's senseless. A window is needed for insulation, for light. If it's underground, that means when they built it, there was no earth there. This leads us to the only logical conclusion. The cities were buried. A global catastrophe occurred, some cataclysm that brought tons of clay and soil, burying the first floors of buildings. That very flood, or clay rain, whose traces we see all over the world. The sterile cleanliness of streets in 1860s photographs is not the result of street sweepers' work. It's the result of the cities being excavated. We are a scavenger civilization. We came to the ruins, cleared the upper levels, dug trenches where there were wide avenues, and called them roads. And what remained underground, we declared basements and sewers. That's why there's no construction debris. Because we didn't build these houses. We restored them. We inserted glass into the empty sockets of windows, hung wooden doors on hinges designed for bronze gates, and conducted an inventory. And here we return to the question of technologies. Look at transportation at the end of the 19th century. Trams. On many shots, we see trams without horses and without wires. Yes, so-called steam trams existed, but there's often no smoke in the photos. There are cars that move on their own. Historians hastily Photoshop horses onto them or talk about cable traction underground. But where are the power plants for these cables? Then, suddenly, a strange degradation occurs. The horse car appears. A horse pulling a car along rails. Do you understand the absurdity? A rail track is the most complex engineering structure, a high-tech surface, and they run an animal on it? It's like hitching oxen to a Tesla. It looks like mockery, like savages using the remnants of high technology after losing the energy source. They had rails, they had cars, they had perfect roads, but no electricity, or whatever replaced it. So they tied unfortunate nags to the cars. The horse car is a symbol of our technological rollback, not progress. We live in houses we couldn't have built. We walk on streets under which real giant floors are hidden. We use sewers that were originally perhaps a pneumatic transport system or power supply. We are tenants who have convinced ourselves we are the owners. But if the cities were buried and the population destroyed or vanished, then where did those millions of people come from who filled the streets by the beginning of the 20th century? Where did this explosive, biologically impossible population growth come from? Let's put down the shovels and pick up dry demographic reports. Here begins the real mathematical magic that historians fear like fire. We're told that the 19th century was a time of incredible demographic explosion. The Earth's population supposedly doubled and tripled in some regions, and this against a backdrop of total unsanitary conditions. No antibiotics, primitive surgery where a glass of vodka served as anesthesia, and endless wars. Do you grasp the biological absurdity of this claim? A woman of that time, to sustain population growth, would have had to give birth to 10 or 12 children, of which, according to the same official mortality statistics, only 2 or 3 survived to adulthood. The rest died from scarlet fever, smallpox, typhus, or simply starvation. Add to that the deaths of men in conscription drives and on penal labor camps. Mathematically, the population should have declined or stagnated, but it grows exponentially. Where did these millions of new citizens come from? The answer is chilling in its cynicism. They appeared out of nowhere. Recall old photographs of factories and plants from the late 19th century. Who works on them? Children, teenagers, huge crowds of children standing at machines. Where are their parents? Why do we see so few elderly people in photographs of city strolls? We see a society that was artificially rejuvenated. It looks as if they imported a new batch of biomass into empty cities without ancestral memory. These new people, our ancestors, couldn't read or write. They didn't know how to build the majestic buildings they were settled into. They only knew how to operate the remaining equipment, often breaking it. That's precisely why we see technological degradation. The most complex star-shaped fortresses, with perfect geometry for wave or acoustic protection, turn into warehouses or prisons. Unique hydraulic canal structures are used as drainage ditches. We are a civilization living on the ashes, and these ashes are global. Look at the architecture. Sydney, Melbourne, St. Petersburg, Odessa, Chicago, Buenos Aires. Buildings constructed in the so-called antique or colonial style are identical. The same columns, stucco, arched windows, domes. We're told that architects visited each other with blueprints. In the 19th century? On sailing ships and horses? Across oceans? To align a single construction standard down to the millimeter? It's impossible. This is proof that before the catastrophe, there existed a single global empire with uniform standards, uniform specs, and a single technological base. There were no national styles. There was one functional style, the purpose of which we have forgotten. These columns and domes are not for beauty. They are technical devices. Domes are resonators. Spires are receivers. Metal frameworks inside the walls are conductors. We live inside a gigantic microcircuit that we foolishly consider just a beautiful stone house. But let's return to the catastrophe. What could have made billions of people disappear and bury cities in clay? Traces of a global fire and flood are visible everywhere. Look at the melted forts of Kronstadt or the glass fields in African deserts. Stone flowed. The impact temperature was such that granite turned into plasma. This couldn't have been done with ordinary gunpowder. This was the use of weapons comparable in power to nuclear ones. or the impact of celestial plasmoids. And here's another fact that makes your hair stand on end. 1816, officially called the Year Without a Summer. In Europe and America, it snowed in July. Crops perished. Famine began. Scientists mumble something about the eruption of Mount Tambora, but volcanic ash doesn't cause such long-term climate shifts across the entire planet with that kind of selectivity. This was a nuclear winter, or a dust curtain after the fall of numerous objects. It is precisely in this period that the break in history occurs. Before the beginning of the 19th century, we have maps of Tartary, strange flags, mentions of griffins and unicorns as real fauna. And after the 1820s, silence. Maps redrawn, peoples vanished, languages forgotten. New masters of life in frock coats and top hats arrive at the ruins and begin writing a new history for a new flock. They invented a fairy tale for us about evolution from monkeys to hide the fact of our degradation from gods. They invented a chronology, stretching events over thousands of years, although all this could have happened 200 years ago. Look at the doors of St. Isaac's or the Pantheon in Rome. Although we agreed not to talk about them, the principle is the same everywhere. Giant openings, handles at the height of a modern person's shoulder, steps that are hard to climb without getting out of breath. Who built this? Giants? Or people with different physical capabilities? We feel uncomfortable in these cities, like Lilliputians in the land of giants, because this is not our size, not our scale. We occupy someone else's living space, and the most terrifying thing is that we pay for it with our life energy, without even suspecting who is actually collecting this tribute. But if the cities were ready, and people were imported, then who organized this logistical hell? Who was that manager who cleared the planet of the previous race and launched the Humanity 2.0 project? The traces lead to those very secret societies that suddenly appear and flourish precisely in the 19th century. Freemasons, Illuminati, various lodges. They didn't build. They are keepers of the keys. They are the ones who were given instructions for operating the remnants of former greatness. They knew there were no stables, but ordered them built so that the legend of horses became reality. They knew that etheric electricity was gone and hooked us on the oil and coal needle. We have approached the most frightening part of our investigation. If the cities were empty, buried, and then resettled, what was the true purpose of this grand operation? Why not simply destroy everything to the ground? The answer lies in the very structure of these cities. They were not just places to live. They were gigantic, functioning machines. Look at the planetary network of so-called star forts. Official history calls them fortification structures for defense against cannons and shells. But any military engineer looking at these schematics will tell you it's nonsense. Sharp angles, complex geometric shapes, abundance of water around. This is not defense. This is a scheme. This is a printed circuit board. If you look at your computer's motherboard and the map of a star fort from above, you won't find differences. Water in the canals is the electrolyte. Walls of red brick and granite are dielectrics and resonators. Metallic connections inside the walls are conductors. We live inside a gigantic energy circuit that was disconnected from power. That's why the cities had to be excavated, not rebuilt from scratch. Because our civilization is incapable of building such a thing from zero. We are a cargo cult. We are savages who settled inside a powered-down power plant. We pray to generators, calling them altars. We use cooling circuits as fountains for beauty. We hang bells where sound wave emitters once stood, harmonizing space. Recall the sensation when you enter an ancient temple or cathedral. Vibration, acoustics. Sound behaves differently there. This is not for prayers. These are sound healing technologies, cymatics technologies that were forgotten or deliberately banned. The old world didn't need pharmacies because the architecture itself healed. It tuned the body's biological rhythms to the planet's frequency. And now look at us. We are sick. We are weak. We live on average 70 years, although human genetic potential is designed for centuries. We have been disconnected from the source. The Great Reset of the 19th century didn't just change the scenery, it changed the physics of our existence. We were switched to low-frequency consumption. Instead of pure etheric electricity, which these spires and domes extracted directly from the atmosphere, free and everywhere, they imposed wires, meters, oil, and gas on us. They made us pay for what was once as natural as air. This was perfect enslavement. No chains needed. Just deprive people of energy and knowledge, and they will bring you money themselves to survive. Those who came to power after the catastrophe, let's call them managers, knew exactly what they were doing. They removed all mentions of free energy. They physically destroyed the equipment. Recall how unique exhibitions and pavilions were mass destroyed at the end of the 19th century? The crystal palaces of London and New York burned under mysterious circumstances. Why? Because remnants of past technologies were demonstrated there. They needed to be shown to copy principles for the elite, then destroyed so the masses wouldn't ask questions. We see traces of this cleanup everywhere. Cemeteries. Look at antique gravestones before the mid-19th century. There are no crosses there. There are urns, torches, antique symbols, forked crosses. The change in symbolism happened instantly. They even substituted our faith, adapting ancient knowledge into tools of control and submission. But the most terrible thing is what they did to us, to people. Have you ever wondered why on old maps and engravings people are often depicted of different heights? Giants next to ordinary people. This is not artistic fiction. This is a biological fact that was erased. We are a diminished race. We are the light version, a genetically trimmed copy of those who built these cities. Perhaps we are bio-robots created to service these ruins. We were bred in incubators, recall those strange orphanages around the world, and released onto the streets with a program hardwired into our brains. Work, reproduce, die. We were given false memories of great empires of the past that never existed in the form written in textbooks. Napoleonic Wars, US Civil Wars, these were perhaps cleanup operations. This was the destruction of remnants of the previous population that still remembered the truth. Look at the photographs of soldiers from the US Civil War. They look like ragged tramps who found uniforms in a warehouse. They pose with weapons that look too complex for their understanding. This is theater. A bloody theater whose goal was to hide traces of the use of high-tech weapons that burned the cities. Atlanta, Richmond, Sevastopol, they were not destroyed by cannonballs. They stand like skeletons scorched by plasma. We are approaching the culmination of our understanding. Official history is a screen, concealing the fact that Earth is a farm, or a mine, or a testing ground. We are not the owners here. We are the staff. And all our culture, science, and education are aimed at only one thing, so that the staff doesn't realize its role and doesn't try to flip the switch to full power. Because if we understand how these buildings really work, if we remember how to use atmospheric electricity, their entire control system will collapse in one day. Oil magnates, banking systems, governments, all that will become obsolete. They don't fear our revolt with pitchforks. They fear our awakening. And now, as we look at these perfectly even streets without manure, at these granite embankments dipping into the water, we begin to remember. Genetic memory is awakening. Do you feel it when you look at old photos? A longing for a home you've never seen, but which you know was real. We stand on the threshold of discovering what hides behind the final curtain. What will happen if we connect all the dots? Empty cities, buried floors, free energy, and our artificial origin. Official history is not a chronicle of events. It is programming code written by the victors to hide the fact of the planet's capture. Those who came to power after the mid-19th century catastrophe didn't just rewrite textbooks, they reformatted reality itself. Think about why they try so hard to convince us of the linearity of progress. They tell us, we used to live in caves, then in dirty medieval cities, and now we're at the peak of evolution with iPhones. This is a lie designed to lull vigilance. The facts scream the opposite. We are degrading. We cannot replicate what our ancestors built 200 years ago. We cannot create stone that lasts for millennia. We have lost wireless energy transmission technologies, replacing them with primitive hydrocarbon burning. The absence of horses and manure in the photographs is that very glitch in the matrix that the history retouchers forgot to erase. The cities stood empty. They were cleared by unknown weapons that caused floods and fires, then sealed until the arrival of a new batch of labor. Us. We are a civilization of amnesia. We were stripped of memory, fed fake heroes, and invented wars. Napoleon, civil wars, revolutions. Quite possibly, these were not political conflicts, but large-scale cleanup operations to clear territory of remnants of the previous population and destroy evidence. Old factories needed to be demolished, ancient star forts blown up, libraries burned, so that new generations would never learn that the world was different. The sterile cities of the 19th century are sets prepared for a new show. The stage was washed, bodies removed, props arranged, and when the curtain rose, people took the stage who didn't remember their lineage. They were given shovels and told, dig. They were given picks and told, break. And we dug and broke, destroying the legacy of gods, believing we were building a bright future. But why was this necessary? The answer is simple and horrific. Control of resources and energy. The previous civilization, it seems, was free from energy dependence. Etheric electricity, extracted by domes and obelisks, belonged to everyone. In such a world, it's impossible to establish a dictatorship, impossible to sell heat and light, impossible to keep people in fear of hunger and cold. To build a system of total subjugation, humanity needed to be thrown back to the Stone Age. Artificial scarcity created, and people forced to pay for every breath. The Great Reset of the 19th century was the transition from an era of abundance to an era of consumption and slavery. We live on ruins we can't even comprehend. We walk on slabs that are parts of gigantic mechanisms. We look at cathedral spires and see crosses, though they are antennas. We are children playing with the control panel of a nuclear reactor, thinking it's a toy. But the truth is seeping through. Genetic memory is stronger than school textbooks. When you look at these photographs of empty, sunlit, impossible cities, you feel longing. This is longing for the lost paradise, for the golden age that was stolen from us just 200 years ago, not in mythical antiquity. They fear we will wake up. They fear we will stop believing the fairy tale about the dirty past and start asking questions. Where's the sewer system for 50,000 horses? How to build St. Isaac's without cranes? Where did the millions of people go? Every such question is a crack in their system of lies.